I just wanted to take this opportunity to show you a little bit, just a little bit.
Okay, so perhaps I'm not quite Martha Stewart, but today we're doing a Martha Stewart style DIY show. We're going to show you how to do pockets for your orchids out of all sorts of different materials, and these pockets are for either mounting your orchids onto trees or onto displays, and the decisions we should be making on what to use depending on the orchids that we are putting into them. So let's get straight to it. Welcome to the Nature Company. If this is the kind of information you're interested in, please hit that subscribe button down below and that notification bell to be notified of all our content so you don't miss out on a thing. So these orchid pockets can be quite valuable little tools in any orchid collector's arsenal, while allowing you to have many more orchids than you would otherwise be able to fit into a single area. They're extremely versatile and can be made out of a wide variety of different materials. So whether we're doing something as simple as making them out of shade cloths or plastic wire mesh or even wire mesh, it all depends on what you want out of these pockets and how you're going to be using them, and whether you want them to be movable or not. Also, the plastic pockets can be either open pockets or closed pockets. With the open pockets, you're leaving a pouch that you can add and remove material from. With a closed pocket, orchid roots are basically going to be enclosed in it, and your media is basically going to be in there full time. So we'll start off with these, you could almost call them wire baskets. These are so easy to make. It's just the same way as we'd be making them out of the plastic mesh. It's just meshed wire that we've rolled up, tied together with the wire itself, and put a little bit of wire at the base. These can be made into any manner of shape, whether they're square, they're round, they're rectangular, and the basic idea is just to hold enough material in it so that if you are putting it up against a tree or something, the plant itself is going to root through the material and onto the tree. It's just to hold enough moisture around the roots. These are particularly good if you're going for orchids that have big set roots. This will allow the big enough spaces for those roots to get through, and if they're going to be flowering from the bottom, allow for those flowers to come out. Things like stanhopias and that are going to need something like this with the broader spaces to allow those large flowers, spikes to come through the base until your plant is big enough that it's swallowed up this basket completely. And with these, they're so easy to put on. You just need a little nail into the tree or a little hook, and that will hold on. Your basket isn't going to deteriorate. It's going to stay there for a very long time, and that shouldn't cause you too many problems. So let's just show you what we do. All we do is we open up our plastic mesh. It's easy to be cutting in a straight line because we can just keep along with the lines of mesh, and that will keep us honest. So depending on the size of orchid that you're wanting to mount is the size of pocket that you'll make. Let's just cut all the way through here so that it gives us a easier piece to work with. There we go. So what we can do with this is we can fold this over like this, and we can either take some Scooby wire or some nylon string. Then all we're going to do is weave this wire back and forth along the edge. Just pulling tight just to hold the two edges together well enough that your media is just not going to be slipping out the side. Okay, so you've basically got one stitch line along the edge, and then we just go through and do the same to the other side. This is probably the easiest and quickest way to make these pockets. As I said, you can make these in almost any size and shape. If you're making them round, then you're just leaving deciding which side is going to be the top and leaving an opening at the one section. Or if you're making them triangular, then you just leave one of the sides of the triangle open to be able to set your orchid into. There we go. And as easy as that, we now have a pocket that we can fill with media. This one of the easiest ways to do it then is just by leaving a little section off sticking out the top of the back sheet. So you have somewhere that you can either put nails through or put a string through so you can tie that onto the tree or nail it onto the tree, or hanging it on a display or something. So that's the easiest way of doing that. And as I say, these you can make into almost any shape you want. So that's your open pocket. If you're using something like your shade cloth, there's also a million different ways that you can use shade cloth in producing these pockets in your different shapes and sizes. One of the easiest ways is taking almost a triangular shape and we'll bring those two edges together to make like a cone, and then this will give us a high end at the top here that we can then nail onto the tree. The one nice thing about using the shade cloth is it's not going to allow fine media to just be falling out. It's going to hold that media in tight and allow you to use it for those orchids with smaller roots, so that the media that can then hold moisture for longer. This I'm just doing quickly, not very neatly, by the way, but just to give you an idea of how it can be done. Also with things like shade cloth, you want to use it for things like oncidiums and bulbophyllums and other orchids that have got those nice fine roots, so that they can then also escape this media and onto the tree. You don't particularly want to use it for things like your cattleyas that get those nice big fat roots, because although the shade cloth is going to move a bit, it's still going to restrict those roots at parts, which makes them more easily damaged. And we don't want to have our orchid roots restricted in any way whatsoever, especially if we're mounting them to trees. The shade cloth is so thin and fine, it will be easy to really damage the root if you then pull or move the shade cloth. So there we go. We have a nice little cone chain pocket that leaves you with a lot of space to fill with media. And then you can just attach that to the tree and have your orchid planted in the top here. And if you want more stability, you can just put a nail through the bottom as well, and that's not really going to go anywhere. The reason that you might need a large media set in your mount or your pocket is if your environment dries out quickly and you're wanting to make sure that you're holding as much moisture around the roots of your orchid as possible, because this will still dry out relatively quickly because of the amount of air movement that's going to be happening around it. It's going to allow for evaporation from all sides. So your media will still dry out quickly, So if you're in hot, dry areas, you really want the biggest pockets that you can get so that you can hold as much media that's going to hold the moisture as possible. In more moist, humid climates, you can go with smaller pockets or pockets that hold less media that aren't going to expand as far out. You can make them narrower, but just a nice versatile way to go around potting up your orchids. So another thing you can do with these pockets is if you're running out of hanging baskets and you're just looking for a nice, easy way to hang your orchid and thinking, how can I do it? What can I do? Well, all we're then going to do is by adding some decorative, hard-wearing, UV-resistant string or twine, we now have a pocket that you can hang just about anywhere with your orchid in it. But now I've got to show you how to do those closed pockets. Let's just use some of this larger one because with a closed pocket, generally I only use them for my larger orchids and often with cattleyas. Here again, we just cut along one of the lines. There we have a nice large piece. And what I'm going to do is decide approximately how big my pocket is going to be, depending on the orchid that I'm using. Ensuring that there's enough room to fit media into. Again, I'll just cut slightly above, longer on the one length, so that I've got an easier attachment. Now with this, I'm going to be closing around the entire edge, but I'm going to be leaving one gap on either side that gives me this sort of bubbled appearance. This is going to allow me to fill in the media. So this one I'm going to be weaving in and out and around so that I can get these two lines basically sewn together. Okay. We now have the two sides open. What we want to do is then check in for where the center is going to be. And then what we want to do is we want to make a cross cut. So we're going a bit down and a bit up, trying to get as close to the center as possible, and then cutting across as well. So we have this cross cut in it, and we can open out the center like that so we can get a plant through. And then we look for a section of our orchid that's going to match into the pocket that we want to use. Now we can see here's a perfect section. We want to cut it at the point over here where it starts to bend down so that we have pretty much a level line running flat. It's going to be difficult if we've got a bend in the rhizome so that we don't have a flat plant. It makes it more difficult to try and fit into the pockets. So here we'll go in with our nice sanitized secateurs and just snip the section off that we want. Remember, at least 3 or 4 back bulbs. Loosen them up nicely. And there we have the section with a nice strong new growth to put into our pocket. Then we'll take the orchid and carefully insert him through that hole that we've just made. Notice I'm putting the top part of the plant through, because often you're less likely to damage that than you are to damage the roots, unless you've made the roots nice and supple by soaking them. So there we go, that's what our pocket is looking like at the moment. We can then, because we have large spaces, remember we've chosen the large space because of the large roots. This is going to allow the roots to root through easily and onto the tree that we're going to be putting it onto. What we're going to do now is our orchid's in place. We've managed to get it into place quite well. We can just go through and tie off the next section. Set the cattleya in the position that we want it. And now we've got a pouch that we can fill with our bark. This I'm going to be using mostly bark because cattleyas don't like to keep that moisture around their roots for too long. They like that drainage. Any of the small bark will just be filtered out. So we can just go around filling that in. And if need be, just to cover the roots, we can just pull back these flaps and insert some extra media just to ensure everything's settled in well. When we're sure that we have enough media, what we can just go do is just take some more of the Scooby wire or some nylon thread or something that you're going to be able to work with easily. All we're going to do is a little bit of surgery to basically tie those cuts that we put into the top of the pouch off. You can even loop that tie off around the orchid itself just to hold it in position. And you can just go through the side again. Just make sure you've got still all that bark in that you wanted. And just make sure it's nicely stuffed tight with your bark. And then you can finish going through the last side to tie it off. And there we go. Now you know why I left all that extra string. We still end up being almost too short tie, but I'm sure I'll find a way to tie that off nicely. And there, eventually, we have our pocket with our orchid in it. This can either be mounted onto the tree to allow the orchid to root through the back and onto the tree, or you could actually just leave your orchid like this in the hanging position to allow it to grow and flower in your pocket. The roots of this cattleya aren't going to be restricted in any way. They're going to be allowed to grow free and where they want to, and without being restricted by holes that might be too small. So again, either just using nails at the top corners or at the bases, or by using a string to tie to the tree. There's any number of ways that you can get this attached to any number of different things. Even if you wanted to, you could lay this flat on top of some sort of display or another, and then still have your orchid easily movable if need be. So now that I've made such an incredible mess, let's just clean it up quickly and we'll show you what we're going to be doing with these other types of pockets. There we go. See, Martha Stewart all the way. She does tend to make things look a lot easier and a lot less messy. Guess that's why she earns the big bucks. Now with my shade cloth pocket, what I'm going to be doing with this is planting in a Miltonia. This has got these nice fine little roots that are going to manage quite easily to weasel their way through the tight weave of the shade net without being damaged in any way. Because Miltonias like a fair amount of moisture and we do have rather dry air at times, I'm going to be using a mix between a nice long fiber sphagnum moss and coir chunks. This is going to help hold the moisture, especially since in such a small container like this, with all this air movement happening around it, it will dry out relatively quickly. And the nice thing about the sphagnum moss is that even once it's incredibly dry, it will still absorb that moisture really quickly. It doesn't really go that hydrophobic. It will still absorb water incredibly fast. So we'll take some of those coir chunks into the bottom, a little bit of that sphagnum moss, mix the two together, gently go around filling in the base, just mixing the two as we go. I'm not putting terribly much in behind, just the smallest amount, because I want that to then root itself onto the tree. This is just to hold that excess moisture in and around it and allow the plant to root itself and anchor onto the tree itself. And there we go. This you can either do it once you've actually put it onto the tree, or you can do it pre and just carefully attach it to the tree. You can have the nail ready and then just wiggle the shade cloth onto the head of the nail, or just have a tiniest little slit to fit it over like a buttonhole. And then if you want to, again, you can put that nail or pin through the bottom to help sturdy it onto the tree. And now for our nice little hanging pocket. So what I'm going to be putting in is some of those Dendrobium fimbriatum kikis that we had done. These we're going to be using a small to medium grade bark size because they don't necessarily need too much water, but they do have a finer root system than what our Cattleyas do, so they appreciate a slightly closer mix. Then we'll just fill it in halfway, set our kikis in position, and then fill it up the rest of the way. Just gently working that bark in down between the roots. We don't want to cover up the bases of the plant itself because that's where the new shoots come out of, and we want to make sure that those have the best chance of possible to just be able to sprout up easily. Yeah, we can already see the roots have easily managed their way through the basket, even just having put them in like this. And these roots will just grow through and onto the tree. That's if you're putting this onto a tree, or they'll just fill up in the basket and extend out to become aerial roots if you've got it free hanging. So doing these pouches is such an easy, wonderful way to look after your orchids. It makes it extremely versatile. You can move them just about anywhere and have orchids all over your house and garden. Okay, so we're not quite the Margaret Stewart show, but there's a lot of reference material in the Buy Me a Coffee link down below that Ed has carefully prepared for you, and please feel free to go have a look at that. And thank you for watching. If you found any of this information helpful, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button down below, and that notification bell, bing bong, to be notified of all our upcoming content so you don't miss out on a thing. Help us grow as we help your orchids grow.